المقاومة في لبنان تحمي الدولة وتحمي الشعب وتحمي الوطن.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Linda Tanim and these are today's top stories. Education Minister Ilyes Boussab says official exams will be postponed for 5 days, awaiting a solution over the issue of a new wage scale. Lebanon formalizes its policy to govern the overwhelming presence of Syrian refugees following a ministerial committee meeting chaired by Prime Minister Tamam Salam. And Palestinians swear in a national consensus government, despite officials continuing to disagree over plans to close the Prisoner Affairs Ministry. Education Minister Ilyes Boussab has announced that official exams will be postponed for 5 days, pending a solution with the public sector employees and teachers who have threatened to boycott the exams over the failure of Parliament to approve a controversial pay hike. During a news conference at the Education Ministry, Boussab said that brevet exams will be postponed from June 6th till the 12th, while baccalaureate exams will be postponed from the 12th of this month till the 16th. Head of the Syndicate Coordination Committee, Hanna Gharib, had warned that the entire government, as well as official school exams, will be in total paralysis starting the 7th of June if a controversial salary raise isn't approved. Lebanon formalizes its policy to govern the overwhelming presence of Syrian refugees, saying the country will work with the international community to build camps in Syria or in no man's land along the border. Social Affairs Minister Rashid Darbas says the committee has agreed unanimously on 3 primary decisions that outline the country's policy. Speaking at the Grand Sarai, Darbas said the committee has agreed to drop the link between the Syrian refugee case with the ongoing battles in areas close to the Lebanese border. Second, the committee agreed to drop the refugee status from those who leave Lebanon for Syria, noting that some of these decisions had already gone into effect. Darbas also said that the cabinet decided to launch contacts aimed at creating the appropriate circumstances to build Syrian refugee camps in Syria or in no man's land. During a brief news conference, Darbas described the presence of refugees as the most dangerous crisis in Lebanon's history, saying all political parties had come to realize that the crisis was a Lebanese affair rather than a sectarian one. Prime Minister Tamam Salam has warned against a one-sided government that could lead to paralysis and stresses he won't give up his powers as set in the Constitution. Salam expressed hope that the cabinet's next meeting will be able to reach agreement on a mechanism of action, allowing ministries to maintain the momentum that began with the formation of the government, particularly in terms of handling the citizens' day-to-day affairs. Provocation or unilateralism won't get us anywhere, said Salam, as he acknowledged the imbalance due to the lack of electing a new president. Nevertheless, he stressed that the minister's mission should focus on securing the elections in order to address this imbalance. The premier also warned that it was not acceptable to use the executive power as means of pressure in the issue of presidential vacuum. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat has denied plans for an imminent visit to Paris for talks with former Prime Minister Saad Hariri. He said an official announcement will be made in order to avoid speculation. Jumblat and Foreign Minister Gibran Bassil were reportedly planning 2 separate visits to Paris for talks with Hariri over the presidential election stalemate. The entire country may face up to 10 hours of power cuts as the divide remains wide in the dispute over funding for Électricité du Liban. In the face of the ongoing dispute, EDL has proposed in a letter to the Energy Ministry either to scale up power outages to up to 10 hours daily in the whole country or increase electricity tariffs to reduce the deficit. Suspects held following the clashes that took place near the southern city of Sidon last year went on hunger strike in Jazin prison to protest a delay in holding their trials. The detainees are supporters of Salafist cleric Sheikh Ahmed Lassir, who went into hiding following the gun battles with the Lebanese army in June of 2013. The 45-year-old cleric, a supporter of the Syrian rebels, is nowhere to be found along with pop idol Fadel Shakir. A Syrian official and activists say dozens of people have been killed or wounded over the past 3 days in stepped-up rebel attacks on government-held areas in the northern city of Aleppo. The attacks are the latest ahead of the country's presidential election. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights say 50 people have been killed in Aleppo since Saturday. Syria's Information Minister Amran Zoubi says 20 people were killed on Saturday alone. Syria prepares for its first multi-candidate presidential election as current President Bashar al-Assad is widely expected to win a third term in office. More in this report.
President Bashar al-Assad's campaign posters have dominated the Syrian capital as the country prepares for its first multi-candidate presidential election. Assad, who in Tuesday's election faces two relatively unknown candidates, parliamentarian Maher Abdel Hafiz Hajjar and former junior minister Hassan al-Nouri, is widely expected to win a third 7-year term in office. Since authorities formally approved 3 candidates on May 10th, buildings, checkpoints and billboards in Damascus have been decorated with fresh portraits of the incumbent president, whose family has ruled Syria for more than 4 decades. Campaign posters for Hajjar and al-Nouri can also be seen on the sides of major streets, but they are far outnumbered by those of Assad's. Assad's international criticizers have branded the election a farce, saying the credibility of the vote cannot be guaranteed as millions of people remain displaced in the war-torn nation. Meanwhile, none of a dozen or so people interviewed in the capital criticized the president, and many supporters seemed convinced that only positive things could come from the 49-year-old Syrian leader's re-election.
What I care about the most in the election is the stability of the nation and its prosperity. And peace also. Peace is the key. What I want from the election is for us to return to the good old days when our country was safe and stable. Nobody knew it would end up like this. The terrorists have ruined our lives. I hope Bashar al-Assad leads us to a new era of peace, security and stability.
Assad's election campaign revolves around the slogan Sawa, which in Arabic stands for together, and has been facing strong opposition on the internet. His rival candidates are both veteran politicians who have been involved in the ruling coalition. Hajjar, a former opposition activist, now sits in the parliament representing his home city of Aleppo. Nouri, a Damascus native, has been head of the Damascus Chamber of Industry and Development Minister in Assad's government. Last week, tens of thousands of Syrian refugees scattered in neighboring countries and around the world voted at embassies abroad, all hoping for a better future for their country.
And coming up next, Spain's King Juan Carlos abdicates after almost 40 years on the throne. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Palestinians have sworn in a national consensus government, despite officials continuing to disagree over plans to close the Prisoner Affairs Ministry. The ceremony at which the new cabinet took its oath was held in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah. President Mahmoud Abbas praised the end of Palestinian division. Palestinian officials reported there was a dispute on Sunday following Abbas's plans to dissolve the Prisoner Affairs Ministry and transfer responsibility for prisoner issues to a committee outside the control of the cabinet. Earlier yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had warned that the Hamas-Fatah deal to mend ties would strengthen terrorism in the Middle East. Heavy fighting is raging in the eastern Libyan city of Benghazi, apparently between the armed group Ansar al-Sharia and irregular forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar, a former army general. Witnesses say gunfire, which began the day before, could be heard across the city, particularly coming from a special forces army base in a western suburb of Benghazi. News agencies report that at least 7 people have died and about a dozen more have been wounded in the fighting. Haftar is campaigning to rid Libya of fighters that he says the federal government has failed to control. UN Atomic Watchdog Chief Yukiya Amano welcomes Iran's compliance with measures to lift suspicions about its nuclear program, but cautioned that all doubt had not been cleared. Amano told IAEA members that Iran has substantively engaged with the agency, including in the clarification of issues related to the use of exploding bridge wire detonators. He said Tehran's agreement in May to implement 5 new practical measures is a further welcome step forward. As on previous occasions, however, Amano highlighted that the IAEA was not in a position to provide credible assurance about the absence of undeclared nuclear material and activities in Iran, and therefore to conclude that all nuclear material in Iran is in peaceful activities. Iran and Western powers are striving to draft a potentially historic nuclear deal by July the 20th. A next round of talks held separately from Iran's meetings with the IAEA is planned to take place on June the 16th in Vienna. Iran's top leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has called for better ties with Iran's Gulf Arab neighbors during a rare meeting with the visiting Kuwaiti Emir Sheikh Sabah al-Ahmad al-Sabah. Khamenei says regional security depends on good relations among all countries of the region. He has the final say on all state matters and says differences among countries in the region will only please their common enemies. Khamenei also expressed hope for a new chapter of economic relations between Iran and Kuwait. The two countries signed 6 agreements, including one related to security, during the 2-day visit of the Emir. And now for news around the world in brief. Spain's King Juan Carlos is abdicating after almost 40 years on the throne. The Spanish Prime Minister has announced that his son, Prince Felipe, will succeed him. Juan Carlos, whose health is failing and has had a number of hip operations in recent years, is stepping down for personal reasons. A U.S. soldier freed after 5 years in Taliban captivity faces a long reintegration and recovery process, according to his family. Bo Bergdahl, a 20-year-old from Idaho, was released on Saturday in exchange for 5 senior Taliban figures held by the U.S. in Guantanamo Bay prison in a deal brokered by Qatar. Indian police have fired water cannon at a group of mainly women protesting against a gang rape and lynching of 2 girls in the country's largest state. The protest came amid a growing uproar over last week's killings in Uttar Pradesh, with the United Nations saying violence against women should be regarded as a matter of basic human rights. French police have arrested a man suspected of involvement in the shooting deaths last weekend of 3 people at Brussels' Jewish Museum. The 29-year-old was arrested in the southern French city of Marseille on Friday. Police say he had a Kalashnikov and another gun with him. The man, named by a source as Mehdi Nemouche, hailed from the northern French city of Roubaix. Reports suggest he may have stayed in Syria with armed groups in 2013. An Israeli couple and a French woman were killed on May the 24th when a man entered the Jewish Museum in Brussels and opened fire with an assault rifle. A Belgian man remains in critical condition in hospital. French President François Hollande said his country will do all it can to avert any such attacks in the future. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Education Minister Elias Boussab says official exams will be postponed for 5 days, awaiting a solution over the issue of the new wage scale. Lebanon formalizes its policy to govern the overwhelming presence of Syrian refugees following a ministerial committee meeting chaired by Prime Minister Tamam Slam. And Palestinians swear in a national consensus government despite officials continuing to disagree over plans to close the Prisoner Affairs Ministry. That's it from me and the news team here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice evening.